I never thought I would be that guy, the one who finds out his wife is cheating and then takes revenge. I guess that's the punchline to my life now. It's a hell of a tale, and honestly, it's one I'm still wrapping my head around. I used to think my life was normal, maybe even enviable. I had a stable job, a decent home, and a marriage to a woman named Sarah who was, by all appearances, the love of my life. We met in college, and it was a whirlwind romance. She was the kind of person who lit up a room, everyone loved her. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. It started small. Sarah became less interested in our weekend plans. We used to binge-watch shows on the couch with popcorn, but suddenly she had book club meetings every Thursday that seemed to stretch into the early hours. I shrugged it off at first. People get busy, right? Life happens. But over time, I noticed other things: her frequent late nights, a new scent of perfume that seemed out of place, and her phone always flipped face down when I walked into the room. I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling that something was off, but with every excuse she made, that feeling only intensified. The discovery was as shocking as it was mundane. One Sunday afternoon, I had planned on a surprise for her, a nice dinner to reconnect. I had cleared my whole afternoon and I was eager to get everything ready. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables when my phone buzzed. It was a text from one of my buddies, asking if I'd seen Sarah's latest Instagram post. I hadn't. I clicked over, and as I scrolled, my heart sank. There she was, smiling widely, wrapped in the arms of a guy I had never seen before. The caption, "Best night ever, blessed." Confusion morphed into anger as I stared at the screen. I didn't recognize this guy, but I'd learned to recognize Sarah's lies. When I confronted her about it later that evening, she tried to play it off with a laugh. "Oh, come on, it was just a friendly night," she said, waving her hand dismissively. But her eyes darted, betraying the facade she tried to maintain. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, anger morphing into a rage I had never experienced before. "Sarah, who is he?" I demanded, feeling the sting of betrayal clawing at my throat. The excuses flowed like a river. "It wasn't that serious," she insisted, her voice honeyed with desperation as she attempted to smooth over my anger with false reassurances. "He's just the janitor. I swear it was nothing." But as she spoke, I could see through the cracks in her story. The way she looked away, how her hands fidgeted, and the familiar tone of her voice when she was lying. It was all too evident this was more than just a fling. It hit me hard. I felt nauseated, violated, and more than anything, angry. This was my wife, the woman I had built a life with, and she was sleeping with a janitor. A janitor, for crying out loud. That evening morphed into a whirlwind of emotions. I felt shattered, like I was standing in the ruins of my once happy life. My trust was obliterated, and the picture of my future, a future I thought I would build with Sarah, was crumbling before my eyes. I didn't know what to do. The betrayal echoed in my mind, drowning out any rational thought. I had a decision to make. Do I confront her again, demand the truth, or do I think of a way to get back at her? Somewhere deep down, I felt a flicker of determination. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about taking back control. As the sun set behind the horizon, I sat alone, letting the emotions wash over me. I realized that this was not the end. I was going to do something about it. I just needed to figure out how. After that confrontation, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. My life felt like it was upside down, and the betrayal stung more than I ever thought possible. But one thought kept creeping in: revenge. I wanted to make Sarah feel just a fraction of the pain she had inflicted on me. I knew I had to do something, and it needed to be calculated. I had to play it smart. In the days following that fateful night, I started gathering information. I needed to know exactly who this guy was. I mentioned Sarah's book club meetings to a few friends, curious if anyone had seen her with him. I was surprised to find out that her meetings often took place at the building where she worked, an office complex just a few blocks away from our apartment. That information fueled my fire. If she was cheating with the janitor, then I needed to find out more about him, and I needed leverage. I decided to casually drop by her office under the guise of surprising her with lunch. I needed to see this janitor for myself. The building had a modern facade, glass doors that reflected the sunlight. I walked in with my heart pounding, prepared to act nonchalant. I strolled past receptionist desks trying to appear as though I belonged there. The office buzzed with people, and I soon spotted Sarah down the hall chatting with a few colleagues. I stood there, hidden from her sight, and waited. Then he walked by, the janitor. He was a scruffy guy in his 30s, wearing a faded uniform that looked like it had seen better days. He had a confident stride, and the way he interacted with the staff suggested that he had become a regular fixture in the office. An unsettling feeling washed over me as I noticed how he smiled and laughed easily with Sarah and her friends. It was infuriating. Here was this guy, earning a living cleaning offices, and yet he had something that I had invested years to build with my wife. I watched them share a laugh, and it felt like the world was closing in around me. I snapped a few covert pictures of him with my phone, feeling like a spy gathering intel. Once I had what I needed, I left the building, my mind racing with thoughts of how I could turn this situation to my advantage. This guy was a janitor, and in my mind that meant he was expendable. I spent the next couple of days plotting my revenge. I considered different approaches, each one more elaborate than the last, but ultimately they all came back to one central idea: money. Sarah's affair with this janitor would end, and I would be the one to make it happen. I just have to dig deep, find a way to strike where it would hurt. Then it hit me. What if I bought the building? It was a crazy idea, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If I owned the place, I could fire him and cut Sarah off from seeing him. I took a deep breath. It was audacious, but I started doing my research. I had some savings, and I began looking into local real estate listings. The more I explored, the more I realized I could actually make this happen. Over the next few weeks, I pulled together my finances, consulted with a realtor, and looked over potential properties. I was focused and driven, wanting nothing more than to erase the janitor from Sarah's life. The thrill of planning this revenge became intoxicating. I would turn the tables on her, and she wouldn't see it coming. In the midst of all this, I found myself wrestling with guilt. Was I really going to go through with this? The thought of tearing down everything I had worked for gnawed at me. But every time I pictured Sarah wrapped in that guy's arms, the guilt faded away, replaced by a burning desire for justice. And then, right when I thought I had everything under control, Sarah caught wind of my plans. She confronted me one evening while I was absorbed in my research. "What are you up to?" she asked, her eyes narrowing as she peered over my shoulder at my computer screen. I froze, the guilt creeping back in, but I quickly covered, deflecting with a casual tone. "Just looking at some investment opportunities, you know me." She looked at me, suspicion lacing her expression. "You've been acting weird lately. Are you sure you're okay?" "Yeah, just trying to plan for our future," I replied, hoping to bridge the gap between us. But her gaze was piercing, and I knew she sensed something was off. The reality was she was right. I was okay. I was spiraling into a dark place fueled by anger, but I couldn't let her know how far I was willing to go. As the confrontation lingered in the air, I could feel the tension building. I had to stay the course. I needed to buy that building, and I needed to make Sarah understand that her actions had consequences. The pieces were falling into place, and soon enough, the janitor would be out of her life for good. The weeks dragged on as I dove further into my plans. My resolve hardened. I was driven by a mix of rage, pain, and the desire to reclaim my life. I finally found a suitable building, a modest office complex that wasn't too far from where Sarah worked. It wasn't just about the revenge, it was also about taking back control. I scheduled a meeting with a real estate agent and presented my interest. After some back-and-forth negotiations, I signed the dotted line. I was officially a building owner. The day I closed, the deal felt surreal. I had the keys in my pocket, and an overwhelming sense of power washed over me. I could hardly believe it. The janitor, whose name I learned was Mark, had no idea what was coming. I planned to give him his walking papers within a week. Once I had the building, addressing the janitor's employment became a priority. I contacted the facility's manager and quickly arranged for a review of the staff, justifying it as part of a new management strategy. As the manager and I discussed the staff roster, I made sure to highlight Mark's frequent absences and lack of professionalism. All things I had fabricated to ensure he'd be the prime candidate for termination. Meanwhile, I had to keep up appearances with Sarah. I couldn't let her know what I was planning, so I acted as if everything was fine. I went along with her stories about her book club, even asking her how it was going. She seemed relieved that I was finally showing interest, and I almost felt bad for the charade. Almost. It came to a head one night when we were having dinner. Sarah was animated, sharing tales of her supposed book club discussions. I watched her intently as she spoke, waiting for the right moment to drop a bombshell. "You know," I said casually, "I bought a building recently." Her fork paused midair. "What, a building? Like for what?" "Just an investment," I replied, keeping my tone casual. I thought it'd be a good way to diversify. I tried to gauge her reaction, but she masked it well. "A building, that's great," she responded, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. She smiled, but I could see her gears turning. "Yeah, I might turn it into a rental property or something. Just some ideas I'm tossing around." I took a sip of my drink, wondering if she was connecting the dots. Did she think it might be the same building she worked in? The days that followed were filled with tension. Sarah seemed on edge, and I could feel her suspicion growing. I had to act fast before she figured out my plan. I organized a meeting with the staff for the following week and set the date for Mark's dismissal. I felt exhilarated. The day of the staff meeting arrived, and I could practically taste the sweet victory. I walked into the building with purpose, savoring the authority I felt. As the employees gathered in the conference room, I introduced myself and laid out my vision for the future of the building. I could see Mark sitting at the back, casually scrolling through his phone, blissfully unaware of his impending doom. After some questions and discussions about the new management direction, I turned my attention to the staff evaluation. "I want to ensure we have the best team possible," I said, looking straight at Mark. "I've noticed some inconsistencies in attendance and performance. Unfortunately, I have to make some tough decisions." The room went quiet. Mark's casual demeanor shifted. As the realization washed over him, I continued, "Mark, I appreciate your contributions, but I can't keep people on board who aren't meeting the expectations of this company." For a moment he looked stunned, then furious. "You can't be serious. I've been working here for years. This is bullshit." I felt a rush of satisfaction. "I'm sorry, but the decision is final. You have 2 weeks to wrap up your duties and find another position." His anger boiled over as he stormed out of the room, shouting something unintelligible. Everyone stood in shock, and I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't care. I had executed my plan flawlessly. As I left the building that day, I felt a mix of triumph and dread settling in. I had done it, but at what cost? I hadn't just eliminated a rival. I had also solidified the lie that had become my life. Sarah would never know the truth of my actions, but I felt the weight of the deception grow heavier. When I finally returned home, Sarah was waiting, her brows furrowed in concern. "You're home early. How did the meeting go?" "Successful," I replied, trying to sound natural. "We're streamlining operations. It feels good." I could see the doubt flickering in her eyes, but she didn't push it. The facade was holding for now. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I had been the fool, and now I was the one pulling the strings. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I had taken a significant step, but there was more to do. The real challenge was still ahead: how to deal with Sarah when the truth eventually came to light. The next few days felt surreal. I had pulled off what I thought was a masterstroke, but as time passed, I found myself trapped in a web of lies. I went to work each day as if everything was normal, but in my mind, every interaction with Sarah felt like a balancing act. She was aware that something was amiss, and I could see the suspicion growing in her eyes. I was treading on thin ice, but the thrill of having eliminated Mark kept my spirits high. It was a fright. When the fallout from my actions finally hit, I had just finished a long day at work and decided to grab some takeout before heading home. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah while I was waiting in line. "Can we talk? I've been feeling like something's off." My heart raced. I knew I had to come clean at some point, but the idea of facing her anger terrified me. When I got home, I set the takeout on the table and found her pacing the living room. "You got home late," she said, her voice laced with accusation. "What's going on?" I tried to play it cool. "Just work stuff, you know how it is." She wasn't buying it. "You're so distant lately, I can feel it." I exhaled, realizing I had to either keep lying or come clean. "Okay, let's talk," I said, guiding her to the couch. As we sat down, I felt the weight of my secret pressing down on me. I took a deep breath and decided to maintain some control over the narrative. "I bought the building where you work," I revealed, watching her face freeze. In shock, "What?" she exclaimed, the disbelief evident in her eyes. "You bought it? Why?" I leaned back, trying to appear composed. "I saw an opportunity. We could use the investment, and it seemed like a good idea at the time." "But why all the secrecy? You could have just told me," she argued, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Because you've been acting strangely lately, and I thought you'd judge me for it," I said, stepping further into my lie. "I didn't want you worrying about it." Crossed her arms, her expression shifting from concern to anger. "You didn't want me worrying, or you didn't want me knowing about your little revenge plan." The accusation hit like a slap to the face. "Revenge plan? What the hell are you talking about?" I shot back, my heart racing. "Mark got fired, didn't he?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You did this because of me. You're trying to punish me for something that was never serious in the first place." "Mark was a liability to the company. I'm just trying to do what's best for the business." I lied, but the tension in the room was suffocating. She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "This isn't about business, it's personal. You're acting like a jealous child." The truth behind her words pierced through me. Deep down, I knew it was more than just business. I had acted out of rage and hurt, but I wasn't about to admit that. "You're being dramatic," I replied, my own anger flaring. "Dramatic? You're the one who just decided to ruin someone's life." She shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mark was just a janitor. I didn't love him. I was lonely, and I didn't know how to tell you." Her admission hit me like a punch to the gut. I had assumed all along that her affair was about passion, but here she was, admitting it was about loneliness. "So that makes it okay," I snapped, unable to contain my frustration. "No," she cried, her facade crumbling. "But you've been so distant, you never even noticed how unhappy I was." Every word felt like a dagger. I had been so consumed by my own feelings of betrayal that I had neglected the roots of our problems. I was caught in a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, guilt. "You should have talked to me." And just like that, it all spiraled out of control. Sarah unleashed months of pent-up frustration, and for the first time, we were having an honest conversation about our marriage. The truth hung heavy in the air between us. We had both failed to communicate, and now we were paying the price. As Sarah poured her heart out, I began to realize that my revenge felt hollow. Sure, Mark was gone, but my marriage was on the brink of collapse. We had lost the connection that had brought us together in the first place. The more she spoke, the more I understood how deep the wounds ran on both sides. "I miss the way we used to be," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But now it feels like all we do is fight." In that moment, I felt torn. I could either cling to my desire for revenge or try to salvage what was left of our relationship. The anger that had driven me to fire Mark began to wane, replaced by a deep sadness. I realized I needed to make a choice, to either continue down this path of destruction or to confront my own shortcomings in this marriage. "I'm sorry," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've let my anger cloud my judgment." She looked at me, a mix of surprise and hope in her eyes. "I'm sorry too. We both let each other down." As we sat there in silence, I knew that I had a lot of work ahead. The path to rebuilding our trust would be long and difficult, but at least we were finally talking. The truth of our situation hit me hard. Revenge wasn't going to heal our wounds. Communication would be our way forward. But first, I had to confront the consequences of my actions. I needed to deal with the fallout of firing Mark and figure out how to move forward together. In the days following that brutal confrontation, everything felt different. The air was thick with unresolved tension, but there was also a glimmer of hope. Sarah and I began to communicate more openly, tackling the issues that had been festering beneath the surface for so long. I realized it was time to take responsibility for my actions, not just with Sarah but also with Mark's situation. I spent the weekend reflecting on my choices. I needed to make amends with Mark. Sure, he had been involved with Sarah, but in the end, he was just a guy doing his job. I had crossed a line, and the guilt settled into the pit of my stomach. I decided to go to the building on Monday morning and find him. When I arrived, I was met by the new janitor who had already been briefed on the changes to the staff. I asked if Mark was still around, and the guy hesitated, clearly unsure how to proceed. "He's gone. Didn't you hear? He's looking for work elsewhere." I felt a sinking sensation. I had hoped to at least talk to him, to apologize. I had to do something. I asked for Mark's number, and after some coaxing, the new janitor reluctantly gave it to me. That afternoon, I dialed Mark's number, my heart racing as the phone rang. On the third ring, he picked up. "Who is this?" He answered, his voice guarded. "Mark, it's Jake. I'm the new owner of the building," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened." There was a pause on the other end. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "I want to apologize," I admitted, feeling genuine remorse wash over me. "Firing you was wrong, and I acted out of anger. I should have handled the situation differently." Mark scoffed. "You think that makes it any better? I lost my job because of you. You think I'm just going to forgive and forget?" "I don't expect forgiveness," I replied, feeling the weight of my actions. "But I'd like to offer you a chance to come back. I made a mistake and I want to correct it. I'll reinstate you if you're willing to take the job again." There was silence on the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. "Why would you do that? You fired me because of her." "Because I realize now that my actions were driven by jealousy and revenge," I said, my voice steady. "You're not the enemy here. I'm the one who messed up. I want to make things right, not just for you, but for my marriage too. I hope you can see that." Finally, Mark sighed. "I'll think about it," he replied, his tone softening just enough to let me know he was considering my offer. "But don't expect me to just jump back in. Trust takes time." "Fair enough," I said, feeling relieved that the conversation hadn't gone completely sideways. "Just know that the door is open whenever you're ready." After we hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had taken a step toward making amends, not just with Mark, but also with myself. The road ahead would still be difficult, but I wasn't going to let my mistakes define me. When I returned home that evening, I found Sarah sitting at the dining table, a concerned look on her face. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "I called Mark," I confessed, feeling the sting of vulnerability. "I offered him his job back." Her expression shifted from concern to surprise. "You did, after everything that happened?" "Yeah, I realized that I was wrong to fire him. It wasn't about him, it was about me and my anger. I just wanted to make things right," I explained, the weight of the moment settling in. Sarah nodded slowly, her expression softening. "That's a big step, Jake. I'm proud of you for acknowledging your mistake," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "Thanks," I replied, grateful for her support. "But I know this doesn't fix everything. We still have a lot to work through." The days turned into weeks, and as we continued to communicate openly, we began to rebuild our relationship. Sarah and I started attending couples therapy to address the issues that had led us to this point. It was tough, but it felt necessary. I learned how to express my feelings without letting anger dictate my responses. Meanwhile, I kept my promise to Mark. He eventually accepted my offer and returned to work at the building. I made sure to check in with him regularly, hoping to rebuild some semblance of trust. It felt good to make amends, even if it was just a small step in the right direction. As Sarah and I grew closer, I couldn't help but reflect on the entire situation. I had let jealousy and anger consume me, leading to rash decisions that could have destroyed my marriage. I learned that communication was key to a healthy relationship, and sometimes facing the truth, even when it's painful, was the only way to heal. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch watching a movie together, I glanced over at Sarah. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the love that had drawn us together in the first place. "I'm glad we're working through this," I said softly, touching her hand. "Me too," she replied, a smile breaking through. "I never want to lose you again." In that moment, I knew we had a long road ahead, but at least we were walking it together. I had learned the hard way that revenge wouldn't heal the wounds of betrayal. It took introspection, honesty, and a willingness to face the truth head-on. As I reflected on the journey, I felt a sense of hope for the future. I had been through the fire, but I had come out stronger. And as I looked into Sarah's eyes, I knew we could rebuild, not just our marriage, but ourselves. As time moved on, Sarah and I continued to grow. The therapy sessions became a regular part of our routine, and it was amazing how discussing our feelings openly transformed our relationship. We began to communicate more effectively, expressing our needs without the fear of judgment or retaliation. It was a process, and there were still days when the shadows of our past loomed large, but we were committed to making it work. I kept in touch with Mark, too. It wasn't easy for him to forgive me, but we found a way to coexist. He was an excellent worker and brought a sense of professionalism to the building. Once in a while, we'd share a laugh, and I could see how the tension between us began to ease. It was nice to know that I had made the right choice in offering him his job back. He deserved that much after what had happened. One day, while we were standing outside the building, I decided to open up about my own struggles. "You know, Mark, I've been through a lot of introspection since everything went down," I said. "I let my anger dictate my actions, and I realize now that I was the one who needed to change." He nodded, a hint of understanding in his eyes. "I get it, man. Life's too short to hold on to grudges. I appreciate you reaching out. It's helped me move on, too." Those words meant more than I could express. I felt like I had taken another step toward healing, not just for myself but for everyone involved. As for Sarah and me, we celebrated small victories together. We started taking weekend trips again, rekindling the spark that had drawn us together in the first place. One weekend, we packed our bags and headed out to a cabin by the lake. It felt liberating to escape the city and focus solely on each other. We hiked, laughed, and shared long conversations under the stars. It reminded me of our early days together, filled with excitement and promise. During our getaway, we ended up having a deep conversation around the fire one night. "What do you think has changed in us?" Sarah asked, her gaze fixed on the flames. "I think we've learned to be more honest," I replied, searching for the right words. "We've acknowledged our flaws and are willing to work on them together. The trust is rebuilding, but it takes time." "I agree," she said quietly. "We both made mistakes, but it's how we choose to move forward that counts. I want us to be better for ourselves and for each other." After that weekend, I felt renewed and optimistic. I knew that the road ahead would have its challenges, but we were tackling them together. I also realized that forgiveness was a two-way street. I had forgiven Sarah for her infidelity, and she had forgiven me for my vengeful actions. As months passed, we rebuilt our lives together. I found myself focusing on my career and personal growth, too. I enrolled in a few courses that I had always been interested in but never had the courage to pursue. I wanted to be the best version of myself, not just for Sarah, but for me. On our anniversary, I planned a special dinner at the cabin where we had rekindled our relationship. I wanted it to be a celebration of our journey together. As we sat by the lake, the sun setting behind us, I pulled out a small box from my pocket. "Sarah," I began, my heart racing. "This year has been a whirlwind, but I've never been more grateful for what we have. I've learned so much about love, trust, and forgiveness. I want to keep building a life with you." I opened the box to reveal a simple ring. This isn't an engagement ring, but a promise that I will always work to be better for you and for us. Tears welled up in her eyes as she took the ring from me. "Oh, Jake, it's beautiful. I promise to always choose you too. I want us to keep growing together." In that moment, it felt like everything had come full circle. We had been through trials that could have torn us apart, but instead, they had strengthened our bond. I felt a warmth wash over me, knowing that we had both chosen the difficult path of honesty and healing. As we embraced, I realized that while the shadows of the past would always linger, they no longer defined us. We were building a future based on trust, love, and shared experiences. It was not just about moving on, it was about moving forward together. As I looked into her eyes, I finally understood what it meant to forgive and to be forgiven. Life doesn't always go as planned, but sometimes the unexpected twists lead to the most profound growth. Our journey had just begun, and I was ready for whatever came next. This was our story, and while it was messy and complicated, it was ours, and I wouldn't have it any other way.